Alright guys, welcome back to Redbeard's workshop as we are working on another terrain project. As promised in the end of my last video, this is going to be some scattered terrain that was requested by one of my subscribers, Ryan Walsh. Thank you for the suggestion. I never really expected that this channel would grow big enough that people would actually want to ask for stuff, which is really cool, and I'm happy to do that when it kind of falls into the plan that I already have for making things. So I was very happy to do this and make some scattered terrain. So the requested scattered terrain was actually some grassy hills that I had in the background of one of my mini painting videos, I think it was. And that are these things right here, which are really easy to make. They're really simple. And the idea behind this was that you could make different shapes, different sizes, drop them down in grassy terrain areas, and then you can arrange them however you want. So you can have different kind of formations, you can have different heights. That way your players have the ability to climb and be on different levels in different areas of battles. It gets kind of boring when they only are ever flat and level with people. It's really cool, especially for casters and rangers and rogues, to be able to possibly hide behind little regions or get higher and just have different levels on the battlefield, and this stuff works great for that. Now, anyone curious what scattered terrain really means? Basically, there are two types of terrain you can make. Terrain that's already set, like one large piece where nothing moves, it's all stable and affixed. Or you can have scattered terrain, which are lots of little pieces that you can choose to arrange however you want on a flat surface. So an example of terrain that's all built in one big solid piece is something I use for my family's Christmas one-shots that I like to run every year, where they had to go find this evil frost giant, like ice giant, who was trying to imprison and defeat Niklaus the wizard, the Christmas wizard. So I created this very icy terrain using all solid pieces, all kind of glued on top, painted. I put some of the snow terrain sprinkled on in certain areas. Got like a little poisonous gaseous pit in here. And so I had a long mat, and then I just placed this on top of it. So this was the main battle area for everybody. You can go with the large constructed pieces like this as well. But again, the problem is it's incredibly difficult to store these. Like, I'm running out of places in my tiny little apartment to put all my terrain. Making scattered terrain is much easier because you can stack it, put it away in a box somewhere, and it doesn't take up a wide surface area in your closet or on your shelves. You can purchase these play mats, which I think are fantastic. I've got a few of these now. So, I mean, this one's double-sided. I can either use it for water, or I can flip it around and use it for grass. That way it already has the grid on it, so you don't have to use a measuring tape to figure out how far your players can move. And then you just place your scattered terrain wherever you want. And if you don't want to buy these, you can just buy a large piece of Bristol board. You can draw out your lines in your grid. You can paint it and design it however you like. I've done that for a few different types of terrain, but I'm probably going to use them less and less now that I actually have these gridded mats, which are very durable. And if you spill something on them, they're going to be okay. So you can use this for stone. You can use it for like winter or snow. You got the black here. I've got a tan one as well for desert terrain. Or you can actually create your own base that doesn't have a grid, and then you'll have to measure out your player's movement. So I have this piece of foam board, and I took I got a long sheet of this material from a Michael's craft store. That it's like a kind of like a felty grass material. So I just cut it out, glued it on top, and this works great for this sort of thing where I can take my pieces of scattered terrain. I can choose to pile them up however I wish, drop them in, put a rock here, and now my players have areas where they can hide behind things, they can interact with the environment, and I can arrange this however I choose depending on the battle that I'm in. And it's pretty handy that way. You can kind of arrange whatever you like. And so yeah, that's a handy option. I did put a lot of time and effort into making a magnetic board. I've only used it once, and it was cool, but it's just a lot of work. The idea behind this is that you place your pieces of terrain, your tiles, onto it, and if somebody knocks the table, they won't move around. So this is what the board looks like, where I had to measure it. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that. And I had to glue magnets inside. Then I took pieces of terrain, designed them however I wish, put magnets in the back, so now when I place them, they stay on the board and they don't move. And then I have all different types that you can kind of arrange however you like. So if a player's moving, just gotta make sure to actually the magnetics fit properly. But then you can move it around and those pieces are gonna stay on the board. So that's a cool idea, but it's a lot of work and it's not for everyone. The other option, which I really like to do, is just get large square tiles, design them, and then make an entire board out of that, which I did for my lava terrain. This here is a piece of my lava terrain. I've got all different kinds that I've built that can kind of be fit together in different arrangements. I've got other ones where there's like a broken giant sword kind of here and you can stick that together. And then it's fun because your players can kind of move around on the lava and you can have them get knocked into it and take fire damage, that kind of thing. But these are going to be more stagnant. Once you place these down, that's the arrangement. And you're usually not going to have like a long mat or a playboard underneath. This is going to be the play surface. So there's all kinds of different terrain that you can make. And I think in this video, I'm going to treat you guys to a lot of them. So I'm going to do what Ryan asked me to do. I'm going to show you guys how to make more of these typical grassy hill scattered terrain pieces. But I thought, why stop there? Let's make maybe some more fire stuff for a fire playing type environment. Let's make these grass hills. Maybe make some more forestry. We're going to kind of play around with different environmental themes. Now, my cat got into some of these tree stands that I made. This is one of the only ones that survived and actually looks good at this point. She kind of destroyed a lot of them. And the problem with this material is it's very spongy and it kind of falls apart and breaks off very easily. It also can sometimes, depending on where your players sit, if you have a lot of trees sticking around, it can kind of get in the way of their vision of the entire board, where the enemies are, where their minis are, and you want to have a lot of visibility. So I had an idea, if they were going to be playing in a large forested area, why not make scatter terrain where there are a bunch of tree stumps and then just tell them these are large trees. That way it implies that there are a lot of trees in the area and they can choose to hide behind them, but it doesn't kill the vision, line of vision for anybody. So at my dollar store, I found these little wood stump cutoffs that have little bits of bark on the outside. So my plan for some of these is I'm going to create just a bit of scattered terrain base, and I'm going to have these little tree stumps. That way you can scatter them all around, have a clearing, but then imply that there are trees up everywhere in a heavily forested area. So I'm very excited to be building a lot of different kinds of scattered terrain for this video. I hope you guys enjoy, and let's dive right into it. Alright, so you just want to decide how many of these bases are you going to be making and how many layers do you want to put on them, how many levels. So you draw out your basic shapes and then cut them out. Really here you can use half-inch or you can use full-inch XPS foam. In the original pieces that I had that I showed in the other video and at the beginning intro of this video, those were only half-inch, which is fine because then you can always add layers on top and add more of them. Unfortunately for this one, I purchased some thicker foam, some 1-inch foam, because I'm going to be using it for some projects where I need some bigger stuff. So I thought, just to make things a little bit different, I would still use the thicker foam for these base pieces, but depending on what you're making and how big you want this scattered terrain to be, just choose the right size. When in doubt, it might be better to start out with half-inch XPS foam because you can always double up, layer it up, and make it bigger. Shaving down the size of the 1-inch is much more difficult. It's possible, but it's difficult. Alright, Alright, so when you're adding pieces on top of each other, you definitely don't have to do anything else structurally to it. You can just glue it, and that's fine. For whatever reason, I decided I was going to use toothpicks to kind of secure the adhesion of the pieces together a little bit more, especially because I knew for these pieces I was going to be making volcanic rock, where I was going to be cutting things apart and using a hot wire knife most likely, and I just wanted things to hold together a little bit more and not pop off when I was working on it, so I thought it was a good idea. Again, you definitely don't have to do this, it's an added step, but especially because I was using thicker pieces, I figured it was okay. If you are going to be using half-inch pieces, most likely you're not going to be able to use toothpicks unless you shave them down first. So my spatial awareness with the camera still leaves something to be desired, and as you can see here, I was painting a little bit off camera, so I apologize for that. But you've all seen this method many times, where I mix paint with Mod Podge to get the right color that I want as my base color, and then I cover everything. You can cover the bottom. I used to cover the bottom in all my terrain, but then I realized it wasn't really adding that much, and so I kind of stopped doing it. And then I always kind of tap the top of the terrain with a brush to make the top look a little bit more rough when it finishes, and it also removes all those brush strokes so you don't have straight lines. Rather than throwing out the mixture and creating a new one, I just added dark paint. I added some black to use what I already had to not waste material, and then what you'll see here for the ice sculptures, I do the same thing where I just add some light blues and some dark blues until I get the right color that I want for that. The idea here is to get whatever color is a good base color. You can paint on top of these things, you can shade, you can make it darker, you can make it lighter, but you want to have a good solid base color that you want to work with. So I typically recommend going with a darker tone of colors because you can always lighten things up later on. Alright, so right now everything's been sealed with our paint and our Mod Podge. I'm going to wait for everything to dry before I start working on it again. Just like you see here with these grass ones, I used a dark brown base. What I'm going to do then is paint the outside edges green, and then I'm going to put my grass terrain on the edges the same way I did before, but this time I might also spray a little bit of grass on the middle here. Going to put my tree stumps down and then put little tufts of grass all around it to make it look more thick forestry. These ones here, we got our dark blue base. We're going to use some different kinds of paint. I'm going to use maybe some paints that have a little bit of shimmer to them, some metallic and color shift, sorry, just to kind of make it look like it's ice and light's reflecting off of it. And we're going to put some snow terrain on there as well. Here's the issue. These were meant to be large, rocky, black mounds with lava pouring out the top all over them. And I was going to do exactly what I did in the other lava terrain pieces, where I break up corkboard which I got at the dollar store as well, because it looks rocky, it looks volcanic, it looks tough. And so when you break it up and paint it, it's perfect for that. And then it leaves a little gap in between where you can fill it with lava. So what my plan was going to be was to cut these things either with my hot wire knife or with the X-Acto knife so that there were smooth edges and recesses for the lava to pour down. I got carried away with the Mod Podge part here and I completely forgot to do that. So I'm going to try something I've never done before and don't know how it's going to go. Once everything here is dried, I'm going to either cut with a knife or with a hot wire knife, and I'm going to smooth everything out and make it flat enough that I can lay the corkboard down on top of it. I don't recommend doing this after you've already put on your Mod Podge and paint, because if you're cutting it, not the biggest deal in the world, because after I've cut it, I put on the corkboard and I'm going to have to repaint it and seal the Mod Podge anyway. I should have done this first. So it's two mistakes I made there. I should have cut it, put this on, and then painted with the Mod Podge. The option of burning it now with a hot wire knife, now it's going to be burning through paint and glue, which isn't really great either, and I feel like it's going to be really messy. But either way, once everything's dried here, we have to address that mistake first. Make sure that we get our texture on here, that we make everything smooth, cut the recesses, reseal it, and then we'll begin to do all the terrain and texturing on all the pieces here. So bear with me while I fix my mistake. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my hot wire knife to trace along the pre-cut lines that I made with my knife, and what I'm doing here is just carving out enough of a recess or a space that later on we can kind of pour our lava down. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to, after I cover this all with my black paint mixture, is I'm going to paint a series of reds and oranges underneath to create like a glow, and then I'm going to try to create some kind of mixture of yellow paint and Mod Podge to create actual lava and pour it through the recesses so it has like a natural kind of volcanic look to it. So here I decided to do something I'd only tried once and it actually worked out really well. I took my sand terrain here and I mixed it in with the black paint and the Mod Podge. When I used the corkboard, it worked really well for like a flat volcanic surface, but I was really worried that doing it on the angles here wouldn't look good. So what I decided to do instead was to mix up the sand right into the paint and then glob it on in heaps. Make sure everything was covered with our mixture so that there was no foam exposed, but at the same time, make it look like it's rocky and it's rough terrain, because then I can dry brush, I can wash, and make it look like natural rock. And actually, it turned out really good, and I'm very pleased with how this happened. It was a happy little like last-minute decision. Alright, so here is the really important part of making this kind of terrain, especially the forest stuff. And again, I apologize for it being off screen here. I was doing a terrible job. But the idea is once it's dried and you have your piece painted the way you want, you're going to take a brush and you're going to brush glue or Mod Podge onto the outside of your piece. You're then going to sprinkle, or if you have a big enough bowl with enough the grass terrain, you're going to dip it right in. Make sure you cover it very thick and then just like tap off the remainder. The point here is you're going to make your terrain look like it's covered in grass, so it blends into the area and just adds an extra bit of realism or immersion for your players. Then obviously what I did here was very simple. I just glued on my my tree stumps from the woodcuts that I found at the dollar store. I decided to add a little bit more detail in as well, so I added some more grass around the tree stumps and some grass kind of crawling up the tree stumps. Later on you'll see that I use a dark brown wash to kind of darken everything and make it look a little bit more natural as well. But you can do whatever you want detail wise. You don't even have to do the tree stumps. The important thing here is gluing the outside and adding the terrain. And you'll see later on in the video I do the same thing with the ice terrain. I glue the edges and I add snow. So just like I did on the grass terrain here, I'm going to be adding some little rocks here and there. I'm going to try to make them as vertical as possible, because when I paint this entire thing white as a base, I want them to look almost like icicles forming upward. Like I mentioned before here, I'm just adding a little bit of red to create almost like a glow or a heat effect to the rock. And then I'm going to do some dry brushing over the rock to create some lighter details here. And we're going to mix some black paint with a lot of water to make a very runny kind of black wash that we're going to then cover everything with to darken it up. And it's going to look pretty fantastic when we're done. You're going to see later on at the end of the video, I decide that I don't like the way a lot of the magma looks, the bright yellow stuff, and I'm actually going to paint over it in black, re-dry brush it again, and then put a wash over it again. The nice thing about doing these sort of things is if you do make mistakes like that, it's very easy to cover them up again. You just take some time, be patient, and do all the same steps again with a black base, a gray or white dry brush, and then you use your washes once again. And here I'm just adding a little bit of brown wash to the tree stumps to make them look a little bit more aged and a little bit less fresh. And again, these are supposed to represent fully grown trees, but this just, in my opinion, looks a little bit better. But you could always use them as cut down forestry as well. Alright, so I'm going to do a lot of things with the ice ones here. First, I'm going to cover it in a metallic blue paint. Then I'm going to cover some areas in a very light blue to make some more solid locations. And then on all the outsides where I want it to look like it's more slippery, I'm going to add a blue color shift paint. The reason I'm doing so many like color shift and metallic paints on here is because ice is supposed to look slippery and shiny and almost translucent. And it's very difficult to make that unless you're using like resin pieces. If you're using solid like opaque art, one of the only ways you can really show that off is by using like translucent paints that will layer on top of each other and show everything underneath as well. And so I think this technique works out okay. You guys can let me know if you liked it. I thought they turned out pretty good, but again, it was kind of an experiment of different paint types. And this here is just me fixing my mistake. I kind of got a little bit carried away with the yellow kind of magma lava mixture. That was a really cool technique and it was fun. I happened to have that little syringe lying around, and it was really cool to use that to sort of manipulate exactly how the lava would flow down these pieces. But then it just looked too busy and too messy. And I wanted it to look a little more clean, and even if it looked a little too like fake, I wanted it to look a little more clean. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, I just painted over all of those places I didn't like with black, redid the dry brushing, redid the wash, and they ended up looking pretty good, and I was much happier with the way they looked in the end. Guys, so that's our video with our scattered terrain. I hope you enjoyed it and can see how it's very simple to make a lot of this stuff. Just really easy. You carve out the shape of your foam, paint it up however you want to paint it up, glue the outsides with Mod Podge or PVA glue or whatever you're going to use, and then just sprinkle the terrain onto the outsides, dip it in. That way the outside of your terrain scatter piece has the grass or snow or whatever is going to kind of match with the setting, and then you make sure you paint the insides. You can add little details like rocks or whatever, and it's pretty easy to use. The lava terrain was obviously a little bit more complicated, but I wanted to add to the stuff that I already had without redoing the same thing. But yeah, I'm really excited with it. I'm going to be able to use all of this stuff, which is kind of the point. I hope you guys learned something or at least enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time here on Redbeard's Workshop.